Hey, and welcome back to another Learning Java 2D Game Programming video. So in our last video, we made something that we call a scenery tool. So what this tool allows us to do is to select pieces of scenery and move them around, or even delete them if we want to. So we are starting to have most of the things we need to make a pretty map. We'd probably like some more assets, but it'll come in time. And it's fun if you have assets as well. I'd love to see something that you've made. But in this video, the main thing that I want to do is to get these scenery objects onto our minimap, so it doesn't look so bare. And we are also doing just some small little fixes and quality of life changes to our editor. So one thing that I'd like to do is, now that we have so much of the button logic in place, I'd like to be able to move on the map using the wheel button. Oh, I mean, this isn't bad. This is working, so but it would be nicer to just be able to, move inside of this map using the wheel button. So we're going to do that, as well as some other fixes. So let's get started, and I'm going to get started on the quality of life fixes. So what I want to do first is just show you something. So in the last video, I guess I was a little stressed and I was rushing a little bit. So I'd like to change how these two things work that we did. So the first thing is here, it is listening on its own for whether the mouse is pressed or not. And while I don't think it's not terrible, because this tool needs to be in one of the button slots to work, or to have this update called rather, so it's not terrible that it's listening to the mouse pressed because it is active. But what is terrible is that it is listening to the left mouse button. So you couldn't put this tool on any of the other buttons if you wanted to, because it wouldn't work properly, because it wouldn't reset the drag position and things like that. So that is not good. So we are going to change how this works, and we're going to do that by introducing an onRelease event to our mouse consumer. So yeah. Also, this cleanup, we shouldn't be listening to whether the primary button action is this. Also, in the same way, we are listening to the left mouse button. So this is very locked to the left mouse button currently, and let's not. So this one is easy. So first of all, let's just not do that, and let's go into the mouse handler, and let's let the mouse handler do the cleanup instead. And we're going to do that here. We have the set primary button action, and I'm going to make some changes. So first of all, I'm actually going to rename the variable to just mouse action. And then I'm going to rename this entire method, because this is not just a simple setter anymore. It's going to do more things. It's going to do the cleanup. So I'm actually going to say, I'm just going to change the name set to switch. So that way we are conveying that there are more things, or there could be more things going on. So a setter, usually you'd think that it's only setting the value and doing nothing else, which means that this isn't really following convention. We should probably change it, but one thing at a time. So now, first we need to check if primary button action isn't null. So if it's not null, then let's clean it up before we change it. And we don't need to use this anymore, since we now have a different variable name for this parameter. So where do we go from there? Let's just close that off. So that thing should now be taken care of. This thing is going to be a little more. So first, let's go to the mouse consumer interface, and let's add onRelease. So now we have a small problem, and that is that we have a lot of classes that are now implementing this mouse consumer interface, but there is a rather easy way to just add an empty implementation. Whoops, sorry, that was not what I wanted to do. let's just put the cursor here. So implement method onRelease. Here's a list of all the classes that are currently implementing mouse consumer. So hold Control and use your arrows to move up and down, and press space to select. So we are going to select everything but the abstract classes, and you can see that they have different a different icon here as well. So I'm just going to do that again because I released Control. Not good. All right, so now that you've selected all of them, just press Enter. There we go. So now all of those should have an empty onRelease event, which will be fine because we never needed it before now. So none of these are going to care. I'm just going to close all because that opened everything. And now in Scenery Tool, I'm going to do the drag position equals null inside of there. But now we need to call onRelease, and we do that from the mouse handler. So just like we are doing here, if input is mouse clicked, then we are doing onClick. We actually don't need the else, so I'm just going to remove that so we can separate these a little more. And if input is mouse pressed, then active consumer on drag. And in the exact same way, I want to say if input, I don't want that space, if input dot like is mouse released, active consumer onRelease state. So this is how I'd like to do it, which means we have to change the input class. So let's head over there, and I was hoping this wasn't gonna grow a whole lot, but it looks like it's still growing. So if it's gonna grow a whole lot more, then we're gonna have to do something about that. But I'm still gonna just pile on more of these members. Pre-leased. There we go. All right, so if this grows a lot more, then we're doing some other solution. But all right, so that's what we have. So first of all, we need getters for those. Good. We need to set them, which we do here in the mouse released event. All right, but we must also clean those up at the end of an update. So I'm gonna change the name of clear mouse click. I'm going to say clean up mouse events. That way we can set all of these to false in here as well. False, right, mouse release, false. Wheel mouse release, false. All right, I think that is all we need. So now we can say input is mouse released and then call the onRelease. So let's do the same thing for our right button and our wheel button. All right, there we go. So now that we've done all of this, it should be fine to put any tool you'd like on any mouse button. So I'm just going to start by heading over to the editor state, and here, so this is getting a little hard to read. So I'm just going to extract method, all of these were UI stuff. So I'm going to say setup UI. So that way it's not inside of the constructor. And in the same way, I'm going to take these mouse handler stuff. I'm going to say extract method. I'm going to say setup mouse actions maybe, or mouse buttons. No, mouse actions. We can change it if we want to. All right. Whoop. Wrong button. There we go. A little easier to read. All right, so I'm going to set wheel button action, and I'm actually going to set that to a scenery tool so that we can try it. So now our wheel button should be doing all the things that, well, the scenery tool can do. So it's going to be able to select them, it's going to be able to move them, it's going to do the tool. So let's try it. All right, and it looks like that is working. So awesome. Yay. All right, good. Now I don't want the scenery tool on the wheel button, obviously. I want to be able to move the camera. So let's do that. Camera movement inside of the action here. I'm gonna make that extends mouse action, and let's implement all the methods. And it's gonna work like the dragging functionality of this scenery tool. So I'm just gonna copy the way that we're doing that. So we're having a drag position. On released, we're saying that the drag position is null. And then on drag, we do stuff. So I'm just copying first everything from the scenery tool. And I'm gonna delete everything that has to do with the selection and stuff because we don't have that for the camera movement. This is gonna look differently since the camera is not a game object. So it doesn't have all the same methods, doesn't work quite the same. So what we're gonna do is let's first just copy the camera position. Oop. And position.copy of state get camera get position. And then I'm gonna add this drag position, and then let's set the position of the camera to this new camera position. All right, I think that's it. Let's add this new action, movement, to the wheel button. And there you go. So that worked out of the box. I'm almost surprised. Awesome. Now you can move around using your wheel button. I guess we could add, like, if we want this to move faster, we could probably have like a setting or something with sensitivity maybe. So we move a little faster because now you have to do a lot of clicks to move over, but one thing at a time. Let's move on. So let's get these trees to show up on this minimap. All right. So how do we do that? Let's hop over to our UI minimap. I'm just gonna check how much time I've used. All right, 13 minutes. Let's hopefully be quick about this. So we are generating the map down here, and after we've drawn or rendered all of the tiles, I'd like to render all of the game objects, but we don't have that in here in generate map. So I'm just gonna give it a collection of game objects. Maybe I actually want it to be a list. We already know it's a list. It probably doesn't. Yeah. All right. So we have the game objects, and it needs to be a list, of course, as we are. There we go. So I migrated that. It first thought it was one of these AWT lists, which it's not. So first of all, when we first initialize this, we only have the game map. So let's just pass in an empty list. You can do it like that. But here in the state, we do have the game objects. So let's pass that in. All right, so now that we've done this, we would like to draw each game object. So let's do this. Game objects for each game object. I'm going to open up a block and start by closing that off directly. There we go. So we can't just draw it at its position because we need to also take the render offset into account. And we can't use the get render position with the camera now because that is specifically for on screen. So let's do it. I'm just going to get position with offset is equal to, first let's get the copy of the game object get position. And then I'm going to say position with offset. I'm going to do subtract and game object dot get render offset, which is currently private. So let's make it public. All right, now we can get to drawing this image, and I'm going to do graphics dot draw image. I'm going to say game object dot get sprite dot get scaled instance, and now we need to know what scale it's going to be. So let's do that first. I'm going to make a size called scaled size. Is a new size. This is just so I don't have to do it up there, so it's a little easier to read. And what I'm thinking is let's get the game object get size get width, right? And then we are dividing that by the sprite size, and then let's multiply that by pixels per grid. And let's just duplicate that and say get height instead, and remove that comma, close it off. All right, so now we should know what it should be. So scaled size get width, scaled size get height, and then image dot scale area averaging. So now we have the image. Let's just put this on its own row. Now we need to know where do we want to put this. And that's gonna be, all right, let's just, I'm gonna use math.round and it gives a long, so let's cast it to an int. So in here, position with offset, get x, divided by game.sprite size, and then multiplied by pixels per grid. So let's duplicate that, and I'm gonna say get y, and then we need the image observer, which is null, and hopefully this is it. Let's try that. All right, so as you can see, now our minimap is filled with little trees. But can you see what's going on here? So it is sort of like chopping a little bit. So it's going great and then it's not going great. And that is because it is so hard for our minimap currently to generate itself. It is doing a lot of work, and that's why it's chopping like this. So there are some things that we can do for performance, and what I'm thinking is we want to cache the scaled images. So currently for every single image, it is doing this get scaled instance. And what this is doing is of course creating a new image and then running some algorithm and repainting it. And then once we get that image, which it has already repainted, we are taking the information and pixel by pixel, we are drawing it again. And we can't not do that. So we can't get away from drawing each image, but at least we could get away from doing this for every image, for every update, or for every time we generate this. So we can cache it, but what that means, of course, is that we're using more memory. But hopefully the memory increase isn't that large. So what we are doing, let's try it at least. I'm going to try it. So we are caching the images. So let's make something that can hold the cached images. I'm going to make a map. I'm going to let the key be the original image. So we're going to use a hash map, and I'm not sure what hash code and equals that the image has, but we're going to at least try it. So we're going to experiment. So I guess cached scaled images. So this is of course because I'm going to try to use this both for our objects and for our tiles, because we already had this problem, but it wasn't as noticeable. So our tiles, I guess you could use the name and the index for the hash code, but then you would have to put tile here. But we also wanted to be able to keep game object sprites. And image is just the most general thing, so it's all just images. Hopefully this will work. Hopefully this will generate some hash code and it's gonna work. Let's try it. So also you could see down here we had like 192, 247, 269 for the frames per second. So let's remember that and see if we get something better. So when we generate the map, instead of doing this, I'm gonna do something like get cached image, maybe get scaled sprite. Let's make something called private image get scaled sprite, and you pass in a sprite. So first let's check our map. Also, we didn't initialize it, did we? No. Cache scaled images, I'm gonna make it a hash map. Let's import that. All right, so in here, if our cache scaled images contains key sprite, then let's just return what's inside there. Get sprite, right? So otherwise, we're gonna have to do the thing that we did up here and then put it inside. So this thing, get scaled instance. All right, here we go. I'm gonna just get the scaled sprite, which will be sprite.getScaled instance. And now we don't have the scale up here, this scaled size. So let's just cut that out and move it to in here. We don't have a game object. However, we do have the sprite. So let's use that. I'm gonna say sprite get width, and this takes an image observer, which can be null, and sprite get height null. So now we have the scaled sprite and we've gotten the scaled instance. So let's put it inside. Put, and the sprite was the key and the scaled sprite is the value. And then let's just return that scaled sprite. All right, so now we can cache it. So let's actually do that. Get scaled sprite, pass in the sprite. And I'm actually going to do that here as well. Get scaled sprite and see if that works. All right, remember these values and let's try this again. So obviously that did not work. So why? If cache scaled images contains key, and this was apparently null, so we probably need to do this right before we generate the map. Would be helpful. Let's try that again. All right. All right, so we didn't gain a whole lot, but we did gain some. And what we mostly gained was it has actually stopped chopping and everything still works. So I am fairly happy with that. All right, I'm gonna leave it like this for now, and if it's a problem in the future, then we are gonna do something about that. Also, I'm just gonna see how much time we have. Not a lot of time. Do I have the time? Yeah, that's really quick. We can have multi-select by clicking, very easy. So let's do that. Let's find input. Let's go to that scenery tool. And this cleanup, let's only do that if we are not clicking on shift. So if we are clicking on shift, then don't clean up, don't clear the selected scenery. And let's just try that. So if I now hold shift while clicking these, I can select several. But as you can see here, one of these trees, the last one I clicked, is moving more than the others, and there is a reason for that. So we are storing them currently in a list, and a list can contain the same object several times. So when we clicked it the last time, it was added again to this list, which means that it got this onDrag event twice. So it moved twice as far as the others. So there are some ways that we can fix this. I'm gonna start by just making this a set, because currently we only want to be able to select one at a time. So, and I don't think that we care about the ordering now. If we would start caring about the order of our items in the collection, we can solve it another way. But this is a quick way of solving our issue. So I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna load it back up, just gonna close that and select some of these. And now, as you can see, I can move them all together. So, yay. And we have our little camera movement tool and all of that. All right, I am quite happy with the day's work. So, oh my gosh, it's much smoother now than it was before when you move around. All right, that is great. So thank you all so much for watching. I guess we could start going back to doing some gameplay stuff now soon, right? Now we are able to move around and do lots of stuff inside of our editor so that we can have more fun maps to play on. I'm just gonna save. All right. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Hej då!